Watch this.
They don't call it the big, beautiful bill for nothing. There's a lot in there, including the possibility of loosening certain gun regulations that have been in place nearly a century. We saw another historic legislative session for tax relief in Idaho, giving more scratch back to taxpayers. However, there's worry those chickens may have been counted too soon, and now they're coming home to roost in the form of a projected revenue shortfall. A local chef brought home the hardware for one of the best awards in the restaurant business, and he's crediting the woman who raised him and taught him how to cook the recipes he uses in his own kitchen today. Gangsters and guns. Those are the things Americans feared during Prohibition that caused Congress to pass the National Firearms Act nearly a century ago. And while it took away the Tommy gun, that law also put strict limits on a tool meant to make gunfire quieter. Now lawmakers are considering whether those regulations still make sense. A section in what's being dubbed the Big Beautiful Bill would strip away some of those restrictions. It has gun rights advocates cheering and gun safety groups sounding the alarm. Hunter Funk looks closer what the change could mean for Idaho and why some say it's more about protection than politics.
Suppressors, as they're called, Hollywood likes to call them silencers, but they don't really do that. They were invented around 1902 by Hiram Maxim, and they were in common use all the way up until 1934. In the 1930s, we had a lot of organized crime. The government decided to start regulating a lot of weapons, and one of those things that got regulated was suppressors.
Meaning, if you want one, you have to fill out the form, give your fingerprints, pass a background check, and pay a $200 tax stamp. In the 30s, the cost of owning a suppressor was out of reach for a lot of people. But now, Idaho State Rifle and Pistol Association President David Taylor says
$200 is not a lot. We've seen suppressors in the states that allow them have really increased in number.
And Idaho is one of those states that allow them. But the price tag and some of those regulations could soon disappear. H.R. 1, dubbed the Big Beautiful Bill, is a sweeping Republican proposed package that recently passed the House. And tucked inside, a section that would remove firearm suppressors from the National Firearms Act. The provision would also eliminate the $200 tax stamp needed to legally buy or transfer one. Supporters say it's a matter of hearing protection, and while suppressors reduce noise, it's not to silent levels.
A lot of people think, especially the anti-gun crowd, that suppressors are going to increase crime, or it's going to be easier to commit crimes and murders undetected because the gun will be silenced. That is a myth. Suppressors do not silence gunfire or the gunshot. Okay, all it does is it brings it down from a level that will definitely damage your hearing down to a level that will not damage your hearing, but there will still be sound.
Taylor argues the move could benefit military members, hunters, and shooting sport enthusiasts. Opponents, including gun safety advocates and some senators, say the measure is dangerous. They worry deregulation could make it easier to misuse suppressors, make crimes harder to detect, and send a signal that gun safety measures are being undone.
Over 400 silencers were found on or traced to violent crime scenes in 2023 alone. So in addition to removing silencers from the definition in the National Firearms Act, there's no discussion of why such a policy change would happen. Also, the removal of the excise tax here is going to cost American taxpayers $1.5 billion. So it's a brazen attempt to make it easier to commit violent crimes.
For now, the bill is in the Senate's hands, where the language on suppressors could change or vanish entirely. But Taylor says he's cautiously optimistic it will stay in place. And then it'll put more of the regulations in the state's hands.
In the state of Idaho, it will only require the same things as required to buy a firearm. So that's a background check and purchase from a licensed firearms dealer.
And whether or not this section in this piece of legislation makes it to the finish line, the noise around it isn't quieting anytime soon.
And it's interesting because Idaho's tried this before. Back in 2013, they passed or introduced a bill, I should say, that went nowhere, died in the State Affairs Committee. 2024, I think it was a resolution to encourage Congress to pass this, the Hearing Protection Act. Neither one of them gone anywhere, but this is kind of, as you said, inside that bill, which still has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, this was something that he kept talking about. We've been doing this for years.
Yeah.
We've been trying to get this passed for years. Exactly, same thing. We'll just see if this round does it specifically for the alliance.
As we were just talking about, too, I saw a study before where they're looking into whether or not repeated gunfire can lead to concussions and therefore CTE. So maybe this has something to do with that as well.
Yeah, for
suppression.
military, that's crazy.
Exactly. All right, thanks, Hunter.
If I would have thought we could do 450, I would have proposed 450.
That's $450 million, as in dollars, as in the amount of tax cuts proposed by the Idaho legislature this year. And that was back on February 25th, before the session was over, in a breakfast session with members of the media, when Governor Little was asked about the difference between his first day of the session recommendation of $100 million in tax cuts and what lawmakers eventually settled on, that $450 million. Governor Little told us that morning he wasn't very happy with the bigger number, but he obviously quickly changed his tune, eventually signing those tax cuts into law. In fact, 2 months later, he'd be singing the praises of more than $400 million coming back to taxpayers, saying, quote, "We can afford the $400 million." But then he also said, what about year 2, 3, or 4? That's what concerned him most. Well, maybe those original concerns about affordability were also warranted, because a new report shows Idaho's general revenue collections are below projections by more than $100 million, which led to warnings from the governor's budget office to state agencies: get ready for some cuts, even to education. Others say projections fall short sometimes, but Idaho, well, we're positioned just fine to handle it. Joe Paris spoke to leaders with very different explanations about the numbers and what the governor's office is saying to agencies, again, about those budgets.
A state budget report filed at the end of May shows Idaho's projected revenue collections, money coming into the state, are $141 million below the legislative target. The budget is balanced, but there are concerns from some that the state will soon need to make budget cuts. The projected ending balance for the general fund was about $420 million. It now sits at about $280 million.
There's absolutely no surprise here. We could see back in January that revenue started to take a nosedive. And so now here we are today.
Laura Necochea is the chair of the Idaho Democratic Party. She shares the concern about what these numbers could mean.
The State Tax Commission was estimating back in January that we would see less than 1% growth rate for the coming year. And the legislature decided that they would build a budget on 6.8%, so almost 7 times that growth rate. And that means they spent dollars that we didn't have, including $50 million in subsidies for private schools.
With that reality, she believes budget cuts to important programs are next. The topic of budget cuts was floated at the end of May by the governor's budget chief, writing to agency directors that revenue projections came up short, but there was still time to make up the difference. A task, though, was assigned to the agencies: internally prepare budget holdback scenarios of 2%, 4%, and 6%.
I think they're finally being a little bit honest, at least to the people within state government, about the dire straits we're in.
Year over year, we're still collecting more money than we did last year. There's plenty of money when we end the end of the year. We're in good shape.
Idaho House Speaker, Republican Mike Moyle, isn't concerned with the numbers, instead pointing to the close to $300 million sitting in reserve.
We've got plenty of money on the bottom line. And remember, think about it. This year, income, for example, is way up, and last year we cut income taxes. I mean, the economy's doing well. The money is coming in.
But critics say lawmakers just overestimated the projected revenue, and now reality is coming into play.
This is one of the phoniest revenue projections I've seen, and certainly that I saw during my 5 years serving in the legislature. It's very clear that they were monkeying with the math to create this space for a voucher scheme that sends money to private schools and for-profit schools and religious schools and takes money away from places where it's really needed.
That, coupled with the message from the governor's budget chief about cuts, has critics focused on what's next. But Speaker Moyle believes there's a different message to take from this all.
I think that it's wise to put a directive out there and ask, what would you do if you had to, go with a 2% reduction or a 4 or 6? And hopefully they have some good ideas, and hopefully the legislature can expand on that and use that for some tax relief and some school funding.
Lori Wolf, the governor's budget chief, wrote in a statement in part, "We are still seeing year-over-year growth in revenue, signaling a strong Idaho economy. We have made investments into critical priorities while leaving a $400 million cushion on the bottom line to hedge against revenue softening. Idaho also has 22% of general fund revenues in rainy day funds, greater than almost any other state." She continues that as a responsible manager of taxpayer resources, Governor Little is simply preparing for a number of scenarios as they get closer to the end of the fiscal year.
The governor called attention to this back in January. He said the state couldn't afford a huge revenue cut, and then he flip-flopped. He's been flip-flopping like a fish on this issue.
But the facts are, we're collecting more than we did this year, more than we did last year. You know, we don't have any kind of a revenue problem. If anything, we have a spending problem, and this may help us get some of that spending under control. Asking these agencies to tell us what they would do if they had to have 2 or a 4 or 6% holdback gives us an idea of where to look in those budgets in January for where some of the bodies are buried, some of the things that are there that aren't necessary.
And I want to add from Administrator Wolf, she says that while they continue to watch the revenue closely, they feel good about the strength of the state budget and the economy, and they're looking ahead to the future, which includes investments in public education, saying that teacher pay will remain the governor's top priority. Brian, this is also something to keep in mind from Speaker Moyle's perspective, that the month of June, which would be the final go of the fiscal year, that has historically been Idaho's strongest, or one of the strongest months in terms of collecting revenue. So it remains to be seen what the final numbers are, but we already heard from the critics that they're worried about federal policies and how it's trickling down from the Trump administration.
Yep.
We'll find out, though, I guess, over the next few weeks.
And I guess if these agencies could afford a 2 to 4 to 6% decrease in their budgets, maybe, possibly, they would have done that prior to this, getting this warning that they're not going to have the money they thought they were going to have, this keeping promises plan.
And I know there's also a conversation about digging deeper into the budgets. We heard about this from the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, Idaho's budgeting committee, that moving forward here in the near future, they're going to start digging into the maintenance budgets, budgets that essentially get a rubber stamp every year, because there are some lawmakers that believe there is waste within the maintenance budget. This could be one activity to try to find that. Critics, though, say that this is just looking for a problem.
All right. Continue to look. All right. Thanks, Joe. Well, for just the second time ever, an Idaho chef has received the James Beard Award for Best Chef in the Mountain Region. And that would be Salvador Alamilla, the co-owner and chef behind Amano in Caldwell. Before him, it was Chris Kamori, owner of Kin in downtown Boise. That was back in 2023. Well, Alamilla was in Chicago earlier this week to accept his award. But he's back home today, and Aspen Shumpert caught up with him at his restaurant to find out what this achievement represents.
And the winner is, opening these envelopes is really fun, by the way, and satisfying. Salvador Alamilla.
It's surreal. Like it's almost like, all right, is this happening? Am I walking up here right now? Previously nominated 3 other times, Salvador Alamia, co-owner of Amano in Caldwell, just took home his first James Beard Award as Best Chef in the Mountain Region.
It could have very well been anybody else that would have won and equally very deserving, so we're very appreciative. A small town like Caldwell, Idaho is recognized, and that the people of Caldwell are so proud of it.
He says the win isn't just about him, but his entire team, including his mom and his aunt.
My mom would make this food and this and that, or my aunts made this dish that was this good, and we would make it at home. But I just thought it was important to share that with the community because we didn't see a lot of that here in Idaho.
Not only is his mom now a hand in the Amano kitchen, but many of her recipes are what's on the menu.
I don't think she gives herself enough credit. My aunts and my mom's generation, again, they cooked out of necessity. And maybe in there it became like this burden too, right? Like this chore, this thing that you do. But out of that was also a lot of beautiful things.
For him, he says running a restaurant is more than just getting an award.
I think the biggest is like what Amano means to the community and the people that reach out to us personally, and they personally say how much it matters and it means to them that we're here and we can use our voice for doing good things.
And I have mixed feelings about all this because at the same time that my story, my immigrant story, is being honored and awarded, immigrants are being deported, and those stories we may never hear those stories.
Alamia was born in Mexico. His parents brought him to California around the age of 5 years old. They lived undocumented until the year 2000.
You could have chose to say anything else up there in the about 2 minutes that you got on stage. Why was it important for you to say what you did?
Obviously there's a lot going on right now with immigration and all that, but I lived that life many years, right? I lived undocumented in California. I know what it feels like to feel like your parents may not come home because there's a raid at such and such place. You wouldn't necessarily see somebody like me that would win that award, right? We work in the kitchens, but it wasn't a recognition that was widely, that you would see. We all have something beautiful to offer and to do.
You've won the award. What's next?
We have to just keep pushing on food, on drinks, on the projects, right, that we want to do. The award is a beautiful thing, but that doesn't mean that that's where we stop.
One of those projects is going into local schools to teach students about tortilla making and Mexican culture. He wants kids to see their own heritage reflected around them, but also in success, to know they can achieve anything, Brian.
I mean, there's so many layers to his story.
It's so hard to get it into just 2 minutes.
I took a turn I didn't expect there in the middle of that story, which is amazing. But the idea of like not remaining stagnant and saying being satisfied with what you have, but pushing forward and trying to do more. I mean, that just sums it all up right there. From how we got to America to now and beyond. So it's amazing. All right. Thank you very much, Aspen. Congratulations. served nearly a year in Eastern Europe, but Idaho soldiers have been reunited with their families today. Plus, a new mural highlighting the natural landscape of the Boise River is coming to the Boise Greenbelt. Adriel Tackett has details in today's 411.
More than 100 Idaho soldiers are back home after a mission in Kosovo. Today, the soldiers of the 1st of the 183rd Assault Helicopter Battalion were welcomed back after their deployment nearly a year ago. Soldiers trained for a year and a half before joining a NATO peacekeeping mission in Kosovo.
Most of our missions were troop transport, either doing infill or exfilling of soldiers into Kosovo in different regions, different areas, and then also a lot of VIP missions, taking people from different airports or different locations there in Kosovo.
Families reunited with their soldiers today at Gowan Field. A new piece of art is coming to the Greenbelt. The Boise Department of Arts and History announced local artist Andy Kelly is working on a mural along the north side of the Greenbelt near the Warm Springs Golf Course. The mural is called Confluence and is inspired by the Boise River's natural flow and surrounding geothermal springs. The dip in warm temps isn't stopping Bogus Basin from kicking off their daily summer operations this weekend. That includes lift-served mountain biking, the Glade Runner Mountain Coaster, scenic chairlift rides, and the Mineshaft Challenge. The Simplot Lodge and Double R Ranch Barbecue will also be open. There will also be guided weekend nature hikes, live music, and yoga. 7-day operations will continue through August 22nd. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Adriel Tackett.
Well, the weather may not be stopping Bogus Basin operations this weekend, but it has stopped Roaring Springs. They will be closed Friday through Sunday because of that impending system that is bringing in some significant changes to our weather starting tomorrow. Roaring Springs today, very likely packed. We're up near 90 degrees across the Treasure Valley, mid-80s right now in the Magic Valley. Even Haley, Stanley, and McCall in the 80s this afternoon. So our final full day of spring ending on a very summer-like note. Now, we do have a chance of some thunderstorms firing off this evening. That is one thing to note. We could have some very gusty outflow winds rolling into the Treasure Valley. If we escape the storm activity, we have a very pleasant but very warm evening ahead of us. Tomorrow, the changes arrive. It'll be nice in the morning. We'll have some sunshine, temps in the low 60s by about 9 a.m. But look what happens to our temperatures. A midday front rolls through. It'll stall our temperatures. We may hit 70 or 71 tomorrow in Boise. We will have very blustery winds accompanying that front, some gusts of 30 to 40 miles per hour, and highs will drop in dramatic fashion. That's about a 20-degree temperature drop in Boise compared to today. So Treasure Valley, some spots may only land in the upper 60s, especially the further west you go from Boise. Magic Valley, a little warmer as that front will take a bit longer to hit the Twin Falls area, so upper 70s to around 80 degrees with lots of sunshine, but blustery winds. Showers and storms in the mountains, likely some isolated showers here in the Boise area as well. That does carry on into Saturday when highs only hit the mid-60s.
All right, just a reminder that if you miss any episode of the 208 or any part of the 208, you can catch full episodes at KTVB Plus at any time for free. All you got to do is download that to your smart television. All right, let's get to your comments today. This one from Ron. Start us off with, I think taxpayers of Idaho paying for private schools and cutting the amounts to non-private schools is totally irresponsible and wrong. That's what they said. We had a couple of comments about that, about the $50 million going to the school choice tax credit. Leave it to Idaho's GOP to have no idea how to project a budget. When will the GOP realize you can't run a state or country with no tax base? Can you say dumb, says Larry. Meanwhile, when a state agency proposes its budget, it's going to ask for as much as it can get, expecting some reduction by the legislature. They don't minimize their expenditures. I understand that, but they're under a new policy now where they're supposed to be really scrutinized. And so I'm guessing that anything they propose that isn't cut out is justified in keeping. So that's what I thought was happening. We'll see you tomorrow.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.